Hi folks, this is C3UG again. Welcome. And my name is Heiko Voigt from Harborlight Software in Halifax. Colin, how are you?
Doing well. And you can tell by our backgrounds, well, mine at least, dining room behind me, moved the home office to the main floor so that I'm on the same floor as the children. My office is a little bit removed from things, and hope all of you that are watching are doing well. We're fortunate today to have something interesting for you. We've got Gordon Hegfield with us. We're going to be talking about AppDevPack 104, the latest incarnation. What's new? Fairly short one today. I think, Gordon, you were saying you're going to go through some concepts and maybe not do a lot of live demos, but you'll show code, and you feel that some of the content's pretty self-explanatory and some stuff people are pretty excited about it. So, Gordon, let's start with an outline. What are we going to cover today?
Okay, we're going to cover the additions to the Domino DB API, so rich text reading and writing, and agent run API, and the rate limiting we've added for rogue applications.
Awesome stuff. Stuff we've been waiting for quite a while, so that's really good to see that these new things coming out there.
Well, what's first?
Yes, I guess I'll share my screen. I got slides. Wait. Okay, is that sharing?
Yes,
it is.
All right. Okay, so already been through the agenda. Let me just start the slideshow. There we go. That's better. All right, so we just went through the agenda. We'll just dive right into the rich text API. So for those of you that may not be familiar with rich text is the means by which all of the interesting things that you see in a notes document are implemented, like tables, document links, images, sections, all the fonts that different fonts you see that you can change when you're editing, all that stuff. That's all implemented in what we call rich text or CD records. If you're a old school core notes developer. And the thing about rich text is that it can have a max length of 1 gigabyte per document. So the rich text API is different from the Domino DB document API because we don't want to send back a gigabyte of data as a property of a JavaScript object. That would not be, that would blow things up. So instead, we implemented a streaming API that's similar to the attachment API, copied pretty much word for word, I will say, because I wrote the code. And essentially what it does is it returns the canonical CD record format as documented by the C SDK, which if you're a C coder, you know what that is. It's the format that the Domino server stores in the NSF database, and it's the format that the notes editor knows how to render. The good news about that is it's round trips with full fidelity. So this API, you can take data out of a rich text item, store it on disk or whatever, and put it back in another document or the same document, and it round trips because nothing touches the data really. It may rearrange a little bit as far as the item structure goes, but it's essentially does not touch the data. The bad news is you really can't do much with it at this point. The use cases are a little bit limited. So we will be adding support in a later release for manipulating actual rich text data on the stream. So as I say here in this bullet, nothing's stopping the motivated developer from rolling their own support if they want. If you know how to write CD records, and you can write legal CD records, you can put anything in the stream that's legal, and this API will write it to the server. So just give you a quick look at the code because I like looking at code. All right, so this is what the reading rich text APIs look like. There's 3 of them for reading, and there's I guess 2 of them for writing. Essentially, one hangs off the document object, and these other 2 hang off the database object. And essentially allow you to, this one, the bulk read rich text stream takes a DQL query, and this read rich text stream by unID takes a unID list, and they all return promises to this readable object, which is what's called an event emitter. And you essentially implement these events and grab the data. And I'll show you what that looks like down here real quick. Here's a query, and passing that query into the read rich text stream, it returns this readable object, which and then we wrap the event handlers in this promise. And the event handlers are very simple usually. There's an error one that gives you a chance to clean up your resources, and then there's this one that's called fields, which indicates that a rich text field is starting, and that basically gives you a chance to create whatever resources you want to save the data. And I will say one thing about this is that when I'm referring to a rich text field, I'm referring to a collection of rich text items that all have the same name. And you can have more than one rich text field on a node item. In fact, often you'll have two rich text fields. One's called the $fonts item, which is actually a font table, which is also rich text, and then you'll have like something called body, usually in like a discussion form, or in the mail memo form, you'll have something called body, which is a rich text item. So you'll have field tells you you're getting a new rich text field. The data is where the actual data gets passed to you, and you can write data right to the disk or whatever you want to do with it. And then EOF comes in every time that a field ends and a new one's starting. And then finally end gets called whenever the entire set of fields that you've asked for is done. So you can ask for multiple documents here. You know, it may be several documents that you're asking for, and each time a new document would start, you'd get a new field object, and inside there's an unID that allows you to know that you've moved to a different document. Mm-hmm. So that's how read works. Pretty simple. Writing's a little more complicated, and I got to be honest, I'm glad I looked at this code before I did this presentation, because even though I wrote the code, I couldn't remember quite how it worked, which is because it's in the case of write, you've got two methods, and it essentially, actually just one method. What am I saying? It's just one, because there's no query involved. There's only unID arguments, right? So in this case, you say bulk create rich text stream right here, and you get back this writable object. And this is one of these things where you wrap it in a promise, and it gets a little tricky down here because you have to make sure you don't overrun the internal gRPC buffers upon which gRPC is what we build our APIs on top of. And so what happens here is you have to have a function that essentially pauses and waits for the drain event to happen before writing more data. So you write a bunch of data, this thing returns false. You come down here and you say, call me whenever you're drained, when the buffers have drained, and then it'll restart the loop. And the only thing to know about this is if you're using these APIs, it's really important to call the end method. So you see I've got a try catch finally, so that I don't escape this method without calling end, because these are streaming APIs. And if you don't tell the server you want to end, it thinks you want to keep writing. So it's important to call that end function. So that's essentially reading and writing.
One question.
Sure.
Writing CD records is always a little bit of fuzzy from what I remember from the C side of the game, because you had also a buffer size that you had to keep in mind for the CD record itself. Do we have to maintain this as well, or do we just cater for the proto buffers that are in between?
You don't really, you can write as much data as you want.
Okay.
I chunk it up into I guess 16K chunks here, because it's just nicer for it's a nicer way to do it. You could write, I guess, larger chunks if you wanted, but I take care of all that on the other side in terms of laying the stream back out onto the 64K bit, on the 64K items, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and the only other thing is that about CD records is tricky, and I made every time I had the chance to make the mistake I did, which is that you have to have they have to start at an even word boundary. So if your CD record has a odd length, you have to pad it with a 0 byte. So anyway, that's some gearhead stuff that probably most people don't care about. But if you are writing this stuff, you probably make that mistake the first time, and you get back helpful things from the server like invalid document format. That's you have to go look for a needle in a haystack. And yeah, prepare to have a hex editor if you really want to manipulate this data at this point. But anyway, that's how reading and writing rich text works. And like I said, we're moving ahead with tools to help you manipulate it in a future release.
So what's the plan for these tools? Is there something decided yet on whether this will be something to manipulate the stream object, or will this be something, say, where you would like hide this stream structure and spit out an HTML code later down the road? Is that something that's currently planned for, or is that something totally out of scope for now?
The tools at the moment that we're thinking of are tools to actually deal with the data that's in that stream that comes back. So you get a stream back, and then it goes into a buffer in a Node.js case, and then these tools would allow you to step through and hand you back, nicely formed JavaScript objects with Olympic strings translated and all that, and tables, the table definitions coming back. So it's more something like that then if someone wants to do the HTML translation on top of that, this is something you could use to do that.
Okay.
That's where it's going so far. That's the conceptual direction anyway. And writing, of course, the CD records back to the stream, which is actually a harder thing. That's a lot of what the API will handle, is keeping people out of trouble.
Okay, understood.
Okay, so the next topic is agent run support, which is, as we were discussing earlier, is a feature I'm certainly anxious to use. And what it is it allows you to run an agent from the DominoDB API. So there's a new class called agent, and it has one method called run, and it essentially allows you to do a couple of things when running agent. So a couple of things are, usually when you run an agent, you want to get some kind of output from it, so you can specify what's called a document context. And so the typical flow is this: you create a document and you write some input data that you want the agent to read into it, and then you run the agent, and the agent writes some output to the document. That's a typical workflow with an agent. And so we allow you to essentially do that here with the options. You can pass the API. And the other thing is sometimes you have a set of documents you want to run agents on. So we give you either a DQL query that you can pass, or an UNID list to indicate the documents you want the agents to process. So on the server side, the Protons support for agents, there's a couple things. Right now, it supports manually triggered agents only. I know there's a bunch of different ways to trigger agents, but Protons right now supports just manually triggered agents. The various targets are, as I mentioned, all selected documents from the DQL, or where the selection comes from DQL query or UNID list. Or you can
the mapping that's done between the list of the DQL query or the UNID list. This maps to the all selected document target. Okay, cool.
Yeah, Right. Yes, that's the selection. Yeah, comes from that, and then you can say all documents database or all new and modified documents, or you can just say none as well. So those are the 4 different targets. You can also, if for some reason you don't want this feature, you can disable it with the any variable allow agent run equals 0. But as I was saying, this is one of my favorite things. I definitely want to use this feature. So I'm going to try to go to code again. And let's see what happens.
Well, just flip over to your browser. I think that should do it.
Yes. Well, we're all working from home, and I think there's probably like 2 other people on Zoom meetings in my house, and my poor little router's about to catch fire. But anyway, so here's some code that that we've got as a sample code. I just want to show how easy this thing is to use. This is an example would actually run if you just change some of the parameters up here for your own, to match your own environment. But down here, essentially all you have to do is, as usual, get a database, and then you call this use agent off the database, and here this name is the name of an agent that's in your database. And you get back this object, which is the agent object. And then down here, in this case, this one's using the context document. You create a document you want to use for input or use for output, whichever, or both. And then you just call agent run right there. And it doesn't return anything at this point. It's just, you just call it, it returns a promise that resolves and doesn't really return you anything that you can use at this point. But right here is where the parameters come in, and you can see this is a selection where we're selecting all docs with the state equals Virginia, and this is, you pass in for the context the document you created up here, and then agent will run, and when it's done, this function returns and then moves on to here. You can read your results, and there you go. And it's just that easy. And so the thing about this is that it allows you, you've got a lot of existing logic, in your databases already, in your apps. This allows you to be able to leverage that, which has been one of our goals for a long time. So any questions on that?
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, that's huge, because this feature one of my customers actually was looking forward to, because with that they're able to reuse all of their Lotus workflows, the workflow class implementations that they have in their applications through DominoDB now, so they can just reuse the old code that they have to process their workflow applications from Lotus Workflow using a React front end now through a REST facade, which is cool.
That is very cool.
Yeah, I can see a lot of use cases for it, like especially if you can fire and return. Like if you've got a front-end app that new web developers try to build a whole house in the HTTP request, which is a faux pas. So here, if you can tell it to run an agent, well, the one question I have is there a way to not await the response? Can you return something to the client? Or I mean, if you couldn't, maybe it's still not that bad if you did it in an XHR from the browser to the server side, because whenever it eventually finishes, it'll return something, and you won't be locking up the UI thread of your browser by doing that if it's async on the client side.
Yeah, I'd have to think about the Node.js code there, right? Since it does return a promise, right? So the promise is async, so you don't have to await it. You can implement the promise explicitly and basically do what you need to do after the promise resolves, if that works for you, instead of awaiting. There would, I don't write a lot of Express apps or web apps like that right now, so I don't have like a real, complete answer for you, but it's asynchronous, so you can treat it like any other asynchronous Node.js JavaScript function.
In your example, you had the UNID of the document before you call the agent, though. So if you didn't wait for the agent, you return that to the client side, then the client could do whatever you want from a UI perspective to call something else on the server side to say, give me back the details, and not even wait for the agent to run. I can see a lot of ways you could build a neat looking UI and not be waiting for a long running process, just eventually get the results of it.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Yes, right, because you control the context document with the document API,
Mm-hmm.
so you have that already. So yeah, I think you're right. I think you can do a lot there.
Cool.
Yeah.
There's also a couple of I just checked. There's a couple of libraries that you can use, for example, to subscribe an event emitter to a promise that's getting returned. So we'll have to see if we can wrap it in there. So you can just like have a event emitter in the background, waiting for the resolve of the promise that the agent comes back, and to fire an event on the Node.js side, and then to do whatever is necessary to, for example, push it out to the front end to do something with it. That should be doable as well.
Okay, yeah.
That would be a non-blocking solution without having to poll for any results. So you can still say, okay, as soon as the promise resolves, I can just fire an update event and then update my front-end application.
Okay. Well, I like the sound of that. All right. Any other questions? Move on.
No. Rate limiting.
So rate limiting. So this is no code here, just some explanation. With act as whenever you call a function and you want to use the act as user functionality, you'll know that you pass an access token to Domino DB API. Now, what happens to that access token? That access token represents some user information that's known only to the IAM service. So what happens is Domino DB passes the access token to Proton. Proton gets the access token and then basically makes what we call an introspection call to the IAM server to get back user information associated with that token. And don't worry, we don't do that ever for every call. We cache that stuff as appropriate, and that all works very well. What we don't do, we don't cache bad tokens, right? I mean, because you can basically have an infinite number of bad tokens. Somebody just keeps sending random things over, random looking tokens over, and basically cause all kinds of problems to the IAM server. So what we've come up with is a way to we say jail. We come up with a way to put bad acting apps in jail, and and they may not be bad acting on purpose. They may be bad acting because they got a bug and they just keep sending bad requests. So what this feature does is puts applications in jail when they've made a certain number of attempts in a certain period of time. So like I think the default is 50, if you make 50 bad attempts in a minute, we're going to put you in jail for 2 minutes. And while you're in jail, nothing works for your application. So this is, when I say application, this is the application ID that's associated in the IAM service whenever you create application configurations. So while your application is in jail, you just get service refused, and for 2 minutes, or you can configure however long it gets. And by doing this, we essentially prevent a denial of service request. We really prevent the IAM service from being hammered really hard by a bad acting application. So this is on by default. We think the default parameters are pretty good. That you can see there's a bunch of config settings that you can change if you decide you want something different than the defaults. But it works pretty well so far, and pretty important addition. And then finally, the last thing really is log NSF support. We were only logging to console log, and I actually didn't actually didn't even realize that this was here until I went to the knowledge transfer for our support team, and I'm like, I didn't know we didn't do that. So this is good. Now we have log NSF support, which I don't use it that much, but I guess to lots of people it's important. So there it is, and you can disable it again if you want to. So that's
for debugging purposes. This is really enormously important, because you might have to scroll through a couple of logs, like on the IAM side and back to Domino, and basically you see something popping by on the console, on the live console, and it's gone forever. So you have to recreate the events a couple of times until you really see what's happening. So log NSF support, that's, at least from a developer perspective, I think that's really awesome. Thanks a lot for that. I mean, that's a truly important feature for me. Small feature, but really important feature.
Okay, good. So that's it for 104, and I hope you guys are get some good use out of these features.
I would think so. Yes. I mean, there's a couple. I really like the agent feature a lot, because this is something that's really helping adopting existing applications, because you can reuse a lot of the code that you have in your backend already, no matter if it's Java or Lotus script. I think that's a very important feature to have, because it's helping to not reinvent the wheel for everything that you have to redo in the Node.js world. So that's
100%. And the guy who wrote RichText must be a rock star.
Yeah, I don't know.
And RichText, I mean, we have to have RichText. That's for sure. And I think we discussed that a while ago, and I think doing it that way that you started will take us a little bit longer down the road to really for everybody to consume it. But I think it's the right way to do it, because all the other options that were available had some initial flaws in them, and so building it again from the ground up will definitely be something that will be helpful, because then we will be able to have full round-trip fidelity, which we're currently lacking on all angles.
Mm-hmm.
And that perspective, I'm pretty much happy to wait a little bit longer until we have more options to manipulate the data that's coming out of this. Just in case, we can still go ahead and build our own stuff on top of it, as it is right now. But from a customer point of view, I think it's a little bit disappointing for some that it might take a little bit longer for them to consume this feature. But I think from a serviceability and round-tripping perspective, it was the only choice. I mean, somebody had to sit down and rewrite that stuff, and I don't know if we should pity you, Gordon, and you'll be it. But anyways, yes. I think it's in good hands, and that's great to see from my perspective.
Good. Yep. Thanks.
Thanks a million, Gordon.
Alrighty.
And we didn't really talk about wrapping up, but as always, what do they have to do, Heiko?
Well, they have to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to just get notified when we get new content out for you on C3UG. And I think that concludes it for today. Stay safe, stay at home, stay healthy, everyone, and see you next time.
And for those that can, enjoy time with your families. Any extra time gained, enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yep.
Take care, everybody.
All right. Thanks.